What is cracking Jubanger?
Yo, yo, Chupanga, 50G.
50G. 50G right here.
50G. What's that
Exactly.
about?
Well, that is about the fact that this is our 50th episode, the big 5-0.
That's
I just can't believe it.
amazing. Wow.
Yeah,
Does it
it's
does it
insane.
feel like it's the 50th?
Uh,
Does it feel?
that's a good question. Does it feel like the 50th? No, it's weird. It's weird.
Mm.
It's just basically about a year of doing this,
Yep.
or a bit over a year, and it feels. Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's just I've just done it every week basically, and just carried on
Yeah.
going. And
What a
so the fact
commitment.
that, yeah, so when I was typing in like the studio today, I was like, this is studio number 50. I was like, oh
Mm.
crap, yeah, this is amazing.
Wow. That is
So just to
amazing.
think, yeah, just to think like started it on a bit of a whim, but just carried on going. It's basically 50 episodes. Um, it feels the thing I think in terms of what I feel is like I feel pretty proud of the consistency. So just
Hmm.
churning out, like keep going, because it's not like, I mean, there's no, to be honest, there's no clear goals with this except for us to have a good conversation,
Yeah.
put it out there, see if people resonate with it, and help some
Yeah.
people out with the kind of conversation that we're having. Hopefully just
Mm.
help people think things through differently, see things in their lives a little bit differently, how they approach their goals, how they approach their health and fitness, and help them see those things differently. And so there's never been any like clear goals with it. It was just I just want to do this, and I'm just going to see what happens.
Nice.
And I'm just, as long as I enjoy it, I'm going to keep doing it. So it feels great that I've been able to keep that up. The consistency is just and it's just a great lesson in just keep going, right?
Yeah,
It's all
absolutely.
about continue to go, and and it's like 100 hours worth of conversation basically.
Amazing.
When you
So
think
tell
about that,
me, I think that's
well,
amazing.
that's like 4 days.
That's a lot of talking. And I was going to
Yeah.
ask you, like, from the first one that you ever did, where it was maybe not quite clear whether it was going to be a podcast or what it was going to be, like, how I can't remember that first conversation. I'm sure I listened to it, but how was that first conversation in from your perspective compared to now? Like, how does it feel?
Yeah, it's funny. Like the first one to me, it was just a couple of dudes having a conversation. Me and Umar when we started. I
Yeah,
know Umar was like when he started and we just like press record. He goes, I felt like I was just just like my heart was racing and I was a bit
yeah,
nervous about it, and then I felt like I was a bit too interruptive, and but it was like that didn't necessarily shine through so much.
no,
So it was just like you just get this kind of hyped up feeling. For me, it was just like, okay, well, I'm just gonna have a conversation. It was only really like right at the end of uh, of of the recording where I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna put it up on YouTube. And like anybody like wants to go
that's
back and
right.
listen to that, it's
Yeah,
like you will hear it. You'll just hear it say, what are we gonna do with this? I don't know. Just put it up on YouTube and see what happens.
see what
And
happens.
yeah, exactly. And then eventually got a few episodes in, and then actually found a podcast host to start distributing with. But in terms of the conversation, I feel like I mean, there's so much to learn in terms of having a conversation.
Huge.
It's funny because it's cool in that sense as well. When you hit record, you feel like there's a judgment on you now as well
Hmm.
about the things that you say,
Yes.
and so I try and be a lot more. It forces me to be a lot more concise. Or actually, I'm not that great at being concise. But what it has forced me to do is try and convey my point like as articulately as possible. So it gets me
Yes.
thinking a lot more about what I'm trying to say, and that's been really really helpful and incredibly helpful in fact. And then also realizing that if you want a conversation to happen, is like how do you build off of what the other person says,
Yes.
and it's good at communication as well. It just shows you, it just really teaches you about being present, because the moment you lose your presence, somebody finishes saying something, you're just gonna be like,
You're like, I
oh
don't
crap,
know.
I got
Yeah.
I got nothing to say, and you're just going to lose the conversation. Like, all right, we're done. Yeah, and that's not how it
Over.
works.
Change the
Yeah,
subject. Yeah, absolutely. And I
yeah,
agree. I agree with that as well. It's like the one of the biggest reasons I love doing the podcast is because of the communication, but also the fact that it keeps me present and having to focus and be conscious about what you're saying. I write certain things down now, but I can't think about what I need to say. And have you ever heard that thing where people listen to answer? You can't do that on something like a podcast, because I have to listen to what you're saying in order to create a response. And so I like the way it unfolds. And sometimes our conversations just go completely off of left field, and that's kind of cool as well. It's like, how did we get here? That's interesting. So it is amazing for communication. And I've noticed that the way I'm able to articulate myself, even though I've only done 5 or 6 or whatever it is a lot better within my teaching and within my classes and in life, I think. So it's a useful thing. I think everyone should do a podcast.
Or at least talk like you're having a podcast, right? It's it makes a big difference, because the thing it does there is so communication is like you're talking about presence, and it puts you present. And then another thing I've noticed is that when somebody's saying something, if you're saying something, and then I go, okay, there's this and this thing, I feel like I can reel off of it. And then it's actually just taking a moment. It's like, it's okay, take a beat and then just see where you want to take the conversation.
Fine to have that space. Yeah,
exactly. Give yourself that space. And also what's really cool is like experiencing what it feels like, the actual experience of not knowing what you're about to say. Like, because there's a lot of times here where we say things and we postulate something, and it comes up and I'm like, oh, you know what, I've noticed that feeling now when I don't know about something, or rather I don't know how to articulate it. Something's in my brain, it's like I know it's somewhere there, but I don't know how to get it across in the right way.
Same.
And so I've noticed that feeling now as well. So that's really interesting to know when I'm just going to go and explore, rather than come from a place of like assurance, like I know what I'm about to say.
Yes.
And I know what to say about this topic. And that's really cool, because instead of it being something where it could be like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm about to say, and maybe I should shut up. It's instead of giving myself permission to go, oh, I don't know what I'm about to say, or I don't really know what's going to come out. I don't really know how this is going to formulate, but hey, I'm giving myself permission to do that, and I'm taking the pressure off of myself as well, because that's really important. Because otherwise, if you're putting too much pressure on yourself to convey something which you're not entirely sure about yet, you're losing that ability to be creative. You're losing that ability to think something through, and you're just basically doing it without judgment. I think that's really, really important. I think that's been a big thing. And you know, another big thing on top of that is just realizing actually when I'm just waffling, you know, it's like you say things. And I remember there was an episode a while back as well where I was like, I'm just talking. I need to shut up. Like I wasn't saying the appropriate thing, and because I realized I couldn't quite get it out the way that I wanted to, I kept trying to say the same thing in different ways, but it wasn't helping clear anything up. And I was like, what am I doing? And then that made me feel even more nervous and even more like stupid and pathetic. And then that was a really big turning point. So that was like, that was awesome. It's like, it's okay. Like, you know, you're messing things up, but it's okay, because I went back, I evaluated what happened, and I realized, oh, this is what happened. And I need to like stop digging myself a hole when that happens. So just, hey, it's okay. It's a great learning curve. So there's been a lot of learning curves from doing this as well. So it's like that communication element, like how to have a conversation where you're exploring something with somebody else who's got a different viewpoint. And, you know, you may agree on a lot of different things, but you see things in, like, principally you agree on the things, but you see things in different ways.
Sure.
And that's really, really helpful. And then, yeah, becoming more articulate is that's a constant process. Is like also being, learning to be in tune with what I'm thinking and feeling. So like the words that I'm saying, how do they make me feel? Do I feel like I'm actually coming from a true and honest place, or do I feel like I'm just saying words and it's not my truth really, because I don't own that information, you know? That's been really, really valuable, because I start to notice what it feels like to not be true to myself in that sense. That's really, really cool. And then also discerning when I feel like I'm on the ball and when I'm not. Is like, you know, where does it feel like my mind goes? What does it feel like? What kind of like the metaphor I use is, I feel like if I'm on it, I'm delving into a well of information or a well of knowledge or like something, whatever it is, and I'm just picking out of it, and those words like just kind of start coming to me. Whereas if I don't feel like that's happening, there's a bit of a block. Maybe there's a block on that well, and I just feel like I can't get in there. I feel like I stumble a little bit more. And then, again, I'm going to keep going because things keep coming about the things that have been super important about this learning process. Another one of them is just knowing, being comfortable with that is another thing. Is like, okay, like today I don't feel so on it. So what can I do to put myself on the ball? What works for me to get me in that zone? And we've got the Evolve, Achieve, Thrive playlist, which is quite helpful.
We
so
have.
What guests have recommended and like the things that we've listened to, and then just like throw a few songs in there, and that kind of helps. Just like putting you in the right frame of mind. Realizing how important it is for me to work out, to be able to feel like allow things to come to my mind. So if I'm not working out, if I'm not using my body, then it feels like there's a stagnancy in the way that I think and the way that I approach things. And it feels like if there's a way to describe it, it's like you're walking through a swamp. You're just lifting a leg up, slamming it, they're like putting it through, next step, slamming, putting it through, and it's difficult to walk through that swampy marsh, right?
Yes.
Whereas otherwise, when I get into my body, it helps me to actually free my mind, and then I'm able to put together like things even more. I can connect the dots a lot more easily as well, so I don't feel like I've got a block on myself. You can tell clearly there's like loads of things that have been learned from it, and obviously the knock-on effect with that is like when I see friends and when I see family or I talk to them and stuff, it's just the curiosity, I let that come out a little bit more. So I'm a curious person anyway. I wouldn't have started this thing if I wasn't, but the capacity to have conversations with people on a deeper level, and that's been super, super valuable, because I feel like, if it shows anything, is like 100 hours of conversation over 50 episodes roughly. It's like 4 days worth of chatting, and I feel like I could just carry on going. Is like, it just goes to show how much there is to explore about the human condition. Basically, you will never be able to shut up about it.
No, and there's always stuff that we're learning as well that we incorporate into this conversation, and we communicate, and we want to communicate about, or like not research but explore, and then hopefully that is useful information for other people to take away with them that listen to this podcast and bring that into their life as well. It's exploratory, isn't it, what we do? Like we both go away, we're studying similar books, or we read similar books, or we might be reading different books, but whatever we're reading or studying or learning, or we come back from our clients with it, we kind of incorporate it into this conversation, and then that we take away and we bring to our clients in different ways and into our conversations with our friends and family, and it's I think it enriches our lives in that way as well. And something I wanted to come back to was that whole thing you were saying about pressure and trying to think of certain things that you're trying to say. And isn't that the way that when you're really, really trying to force something, it doesn't work? Do you know what I mean? Whether it's conversation or a thought process or just whatever it could be, I don't know, in health and fitness, maybe you're trying to force a goal that isn't, it's almost just a bit too much, or it's not quite right. And I don't know, there was something in that if you try and force something too much, it's not going to come. You've almost just got to let it unfold a little bit and figure it out. And that's kind of what you were saying that you do in the podcast. And I think that's what we both do, isn't it? Like I remember I listened back to the podcast just to give our listeners an idea, just so I can transcribe and just listen back to try and almost think about what we were both saying. And I've noticed that I've got better at going, okay, I haven't got the idea formulated in my head, but I'm going to keep talking, and it generally starts to unfold as we both start talking. And you do it as well. I know that you probably do it more than I do. And I think that's a really important thing to be able to do in communication, is just not have a set thing to say, but to just let it start to unfold and see where it goes. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. It's not wrong, but it's just, let's explore it and try and unravel what it is that I'm trying to say. And it generally, from all the podcasts I've listened back to, it generally comes out and it's a useful thing. So that's been mega useful.
Yeah, exactly. And
I also think, go on, sorry.
I was going to say on that note, because I got invited on another podcast, which the episode isn't going to be published yet. When that's going to be ready, I'll let people know. And then there was something that I was saying. I was like, again, I was in a place where I was like, okay, we're just exploring something here, because I haven't, I've got a feeling about this, but I haven't articulated this before. And then so it's this really interesting sensation of, the more I spoke about it, the more of an understanding I gained, and it was more that things started to unveil themselves to me. And so it's kind of like, okay, here's my level of knowledge with it, which is zero. It's like there's nothing. And then when I start talking about it, or rather, it's like not articulated knowledge, basically.
You haven't. You've got the knowledge. That's why I was laughing. Yeah. It's like, no, so you've got it. You just haven't done it yet.
Well, it's just, it's just exploring. Yeah, exactly. You haven't done it yet. It was just exploring. It's like, okay, it's a concept or is a topic. It's like, I'm not going to say anything about it yet, because it wasn't on my podcast, and that'll get revealed when that podcast comes out. But it was just a topic where I was like, I have a feeling about this. I don't know if what I'm going to say is going to be right, but let's just explore. So, zero information about it. Start saying some things. And kind of, you're just fumbling around. But as I'm fumbling around, that starts to expand itself. So people aren't watching or listening. Instead, I've gone from having a fist to just opening up my hands, and it get big. The space that I'm exploring getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because when I start going down that road, it starts to span outwards. The horizon looks a lot wider, and I'm like, oh, okay, there's more here that I could explore, and I don't know which direction I'm taking. Yeah, there's like this. Well, I start off with not knowing anything, or rather being able to articulate it. Then I go further down that road, and then that horizon expands itself. So I'm like, okay, the more I speak, the more the options that I see for what this concept is that we're trying to discuss. And I was fumbling my way through it, and I was starting to feel like I was, getting even further and further in terms of more and more things about this concept were unfolding before my eyes. So I just realized I would just keep on talking, and I kept exploring and describing these different things, and it was a really interesting sensation. But I wasn't sure that I was making it make sense in the right way. I wasn't saying the right words. And then, just as a kind of passing comment, I was just like, I came up with the right way to describe it for me. And I was like, oh, right, all that. Felt like I was fumbling through it, and I didn't really know if I was getting my point across. But then, without even realizing it, that last sentence that I said about it, to me, made the most sense about what I was saying. I was like, oh, I finally got there in the end.
But isn't that brilliant?
Exactly, because you have to fumble your way through it, basically, because that's the point. Is like you're not going to have the answer in front of you when you're approaching something that you're not sure about. So you just go down. You shoot first, ask questions later, is the kind of thing, or is like just have a action plan. It doesn't matter how awful it is. Like that's like Jordan Peterson always he likes to say this. He goes, just start something and start badly. And that's so helpful for perfectionists, especially. So you start on it, you start terribly, and which is exactly what I did. I was starting terribly, but then right at the end, I just said that one sentence, which was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
There you go.
That's exactly how I wanted to say it. So yeah, there's so much value in just starting and just doing that thing, fumbling through it, but eventually you're going to be better off for having done that, because now I have a way of thinking about this thing which is a lot more matured than when I started with that as well. And then
you're gonna take that more mature level, and you're going to expand it further as you bring it into your everyday or whatever you're doing, you're teaching, whatever. So that's an important thing. Another thing that I as you were talking is it's just saying that actually trying to relay something in conversation is important for bringing that knowledge forth, isn't it? So actually trying to relay it. And it was just when you were talking, it's like we read so much, like in particular we read about neuroscience and things like that. We read so much, but actually to then try and summarize that information that we've read is hard. So these conversations are actually hugely important for trying to almost come to an understanding of that complicated subject that we're reading. Yeah, we read, in particular, that comes to mind, the book by Lisa Feldman Barrett, How Emotions Are Made, which I found incredibly complicated. But actually, when we started talking about it, it became simpler to understand. So I think conversation and communication bring out the knowledge that you may have taken in via another format, say reading or online study or whatever it is, or being in a physical course, and it almost brings it forward so that you can then recreate it in your sessions or wherever else you are. So I think that's a really cool thing as well. What
Yeah,
I
because
also
you can't really own that thing until
no
you've tried to
expressed
understand
it.
it on that level, expressed it. Yeah. So when you have that conversation, it's like, writing and having a conversation about it. I think those are the most important ways of understanding whether you actually understand something.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and so, but for me, conversation's hands down the best one. So every time there's something that comes up where it's like, I want to understand this a little bit more, I start having a conversation about it. And it's like, I fumble my way through these conversations all the time because I'm like, okay, there's like three overarching themes here for this particular concept. And it's this, and it's this, and it's this. Okay. And then I'm like, all right, what am I going to do with that? And then I just start going. But the thing is, I'm consolidating that knowledge within me. And then I have questions that come up. And by asking questions, you're firing up the part of you which is looking for an answer. And that makes you more in tune and more related to the unknown, right? You get it a lot more, because if you're asking questions about the thing that you've just like learned and then try to articulate, and the articulation leads to questions, and it's like, okay, good, that means you're getting a handle on it. Because if it didn't lead to any questions, if you're just like, yep, I get it, it's like, no,
I understand. So
you have to. Yeah, I don't necessarily think you do. I think you have to go, all right, well, if I feel like I understand it, I'm going to ask myself a question about it. And can I answer that question? It's like, okay, well, it seems like they're saying this. Is that correct? Yes or no? And based on the thing that you've read. And but other people are the ones that are most helpful in helping you discern that as well, because you can go, I don't know, together and try and figure it out, or
you figure it
one
out.
person knows and the other one doesn't, and therefore you taken on some new insight. But yeah, whatever. That's why I've said it so many times on this podcast, is people just have conversations, just put your shit down, like forget about social media. It's like, this is what it's about. This is how you get to know people. This is how you get to understand yourself, and understand, what you're truly about. And yeah, you get a hell of a lot more richness from that kind of experience.
I also think, just from what you were saying there, it depends on personality types as well. It's like, this podcast for me is like a safe space to explore communication, and I feel comfortable doing that. And I think maybe and I've been in lots and lots of different study situations, and sometimes I don't feel as safe to ask questions and explore and feel comfortable doing that. Do you know what I mean? So I think it definitely takes, I want to say, a certain sort of person, for me anyway, to feel comfortable exploring. Do you know what I mean? It's I wouldn't necessarily ask questions with lots of people, and I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I think sometimes maybe people might not feel safe, and I want myself, in particular in my sessions and wherever, I want people to feel safe enough to be able to ask questions with me as well, and not feel that they're asking something stupid or that they feel silly. It's like, that's a really important thing for me, so that people feel that they can approach me. And I guess what I'm getting at is that in this podcast, I feel comfortable enough to explore most things, and it's not always the way. And I think that's to do with maybe different personality types, and that's just where I was going with that. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, the kind of person that you are, changes how comfortable you feel in the environment you're in. If you're more extroverted, for example, then if you're in a group scenario, you're probably going to be the person just like leading the charge in terms of asking questions, Or if you're a bit more introverted, you're like, yeah, no, I'll just, hang back. Let me see if I can feel a little bit safer in this environment, and then I'll maybe ask, questions on a bit more of a personal level to the instructor when I get that one-to-one going on. But in either case, is like ask questions, because that's the best way to acquire the information and knowledge that you need and seek for being in the place that you want to be in. And to make that more concrete, it's when it comes to health and fitness, it's like there's things that you need to know, and in a lot of cases, it happens often where it's like, just set that one piece of information that you provide to the client, which triggers that transformation. That's worth the fee that they pay you for the whole program, because they're like, that was really, really important for me to understand or to hear or to know. And that can change their world. So if you don't ask the question, then you're not going to get that transformation. So ask that question. I had a good example of it a little while ago, where one of my clients recovering from a knee injury and started getting anxious about whether there was a bigger problem there, and in terms of like, okay, I've had this injury, but could it be this on top of that? I was like, look, all that stuff would have come out in your imaging, in your assessments with your practitioner. So don't even worry about it, because somebody else was making him doubt it, who was not a professional, like just somebody he was talking to.
But that's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, because they're like, make sure you do this and that, because it got missed on my friends. It's like, look, they don't know what they're talking about, because there's so many factors that are going on here. But for you specifically, this is not a problem. And it was like, the relief that I felt was like, thanks, I really needed to hear that. That was a big deal. And if I wasn't there to basically support them in that moment, then they could spiral out of their rehab program and then continue to just go off kilter and just mess everything up. So it's super valuable to be able to ask that question so that you can rest assured.
That's really interesting about your client, and it's made me think about, when you or someone comes to you and they've had that kind of unsolicited advice or comments. Like I've had instances where a client's come to me and they've had a C-section or a diastasis recti, which is an abdominal separation, which we've talked about in a previous podcast, and a flippant remark from someone that wasn't trained but within the fitness industry, saying that they're going to need surgery, where they've had no assessment from that person. It was just a flippant remark, and that changed everything. And it was like, and it was a real lesson to me as well. It's like, you be careful with your words at any point. It doesn't matter whether you're in a session with a client or where it's like, and I've had unsolicited advice over the months and years, especially recently, and it is just, be careful with those flippant remarks, because people will take that flippant remark potentially and run with it. And it really affected this client. It's like, do I need surgery? I was like, no, you do not. You do not need surgery. It's absolutely 100% fixable. It's I don't know why anyone would say that, but it was like a real learning curve for me, that your words have such power and you have to use them so wisely. And I know you can't be on your guard every single moment of every single day, and you do say flippant remarks and you don't mean it, or it came out wrong, and that's fine. But in particular, especially with medical advice or advice that you don't know because you might have heard or your mate said it, or it's like, I think just especially when we're in this industry, it's like, do be careful with your words. And I'm always very careful when someone comes to me to not poo-poo anything else that they've done within their recovery. It's like, I've done this and that and this and that and that, and I'm like, great, that's brilliant, because we know that doesn't work, and that's fantastic. That hasn't worked for you, and that's okay. everything they've done is brilliant, but maybe if we try this, that's good. And I just think it's so important, you know. It's almost, if you say, oh well, that physio that you have was terrible, and it's like, it's going to make them feel awful. So
Yeah.
I just think it's like, that's amazing that you've done that. Like, your words have such impact. That's amazing that you've done that. Let's try this and see how that works. So yeah, it's just that unsolicited advice, just from personal experience as well. And I know it comes from a good place, and I know it comes from a place where people mean no harm, but sometimes it can be harmful.
Yeah, of course. It's just, yeah, I mean, thinking about this case, thinking about what you're saying there as well, it's just, it comes out of, you just, you just don't realize what the effect is going to be. And also, yeah, I kind of love how I love because I'm thinking of an example here. I love how this always works out as well. I remember after a jiu-jitsu class years back, and one of the guys, one of my rolling partners was like, I feel like this is happening with my knee. You know, can you let me know, like, can you give me some tips about it? And obviously there's a protocol here. It's like, okay, well, first of all, I'm not a physio, I'm not a chiropractor or something. I'm not going to be able to do an orthopedic assessment on this kind of thing, but
Yeah.
I'll gather some information. If there's something useful I can give you, great. If there's not, then I'm going to suggest that anyway that you go and see someone, right? Because that's your first port of call, is like, let's just rule out anything pathological.
100%.
Yeah, so it's like, ask me that question, but there were a couple other guys there who have had knee injuries and are currently training with knee injuries. And before I could even say anything, they started chiming in, right?
The way.
Yeah, like, yeah, my knee does this, so maybe you want to look into that. And they were just talking, and I was just so curious about this phenomena, right?
Yeah.
So I just let it happen. So I was just like, okay, I've been the one who's been asked the question, right? You guys don't need to chime in, but you are chiming in anyway. And the things you are saying are, first of all, ludicrous. Like, you're still struggling with that same injury, so don't feel like you can give advice on something. And it's not your place. So all of that was going on. It was fascinating. The number one thing which was actually, for me, forget about, like, you're trying to give advice on something that you actually have no idea about. The number one thing was, I was the one who was asked the question, and other people tried to answer it, right? And I'm like, how rude is that? Number one, is like, you've got no place here. This isn't between you guys and this person. It's between me and this other person. So it was, that was kind of hilarious as well. But that's what happens. Is like,
it is what happens.
You do something, you feel like, I don't know, having an injury makes you an expert in that injury. Basically, is just generally what happens. It's like, well, depends, but in most cases, it's not going to do that, because in most cases you don't really know what you're doing for that recovery. So it's that kind of thing just fascinates me. How just there's that initial jumping into the conversation.
I think it is that, and it's like I say, I think it comes from a place of good. People genuinely want to help and give their information that they've experienced, but it is thoughtless at the same time. And I don't know why this word came to mind, but it's a little bit arrogant as well. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it's like, oh, I know better. I've had it. So, and it's like, yeah, but you're not a trained professional. It's like, I have a back injury and I'm a professional, but that doesn't necessarily, I have experience with spondylolisthesis, which is a lower back pain condition that I have, but it's going to present differently in everyone. So never presume for a second that you're going to know exactly how this is going to play out. Yeah, I have a good idea, but it's always going to be slightly different in everyone that you see. And I've had that so many times when people will just bat in and talk about stuff, and I'm like, oh, you know this? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Please take center stage. I'll let you
carry on. But I get it a lot. And what I find really interesting as well is when, I don't know, people will go that know you really, really well, or family members will get advice from other people about stuff that you know. and you're kind of the last person that they ask. It's like, this is my job, this is what I do, but Mary down the road has given you the information that you need, and it's like, yeah, it's not quite right, but okay, carry on. And come to me when you need me.
Well, the thing is, there's something, I don't know the exact term, but it's something to do with peer bias. Basically, you know, you're that person is a family member or a friend, is like, so they see you as a peer, so they don't look at you as an expert in this field. So especially if it's like you know, you like older siblings or parents or something like that, it could just be, it's like, it's not necessarily the case for me, but I've heard other people is like, oh, you know, he's just doing that trading thing, you know. Well, this is what happened with, like, for example, some uncles, and they're like, so when are you gonna become a physiotherapist? I was like, I don't want to.
When you're going to get a proper job?
So,
it's like,
I don't care. Exactly. I don't care. It's like, that's not my thing. So, I actually had a comeback in my head, but I just couldn't say it. I was like, there's no way I could say that. It's going to ruin some family relations. But anyway, but yeah, it's like that whole, they see you as a peer, so they don't see you as an expert in this particular thing. So if they're going to ask you that question, well, they won't. They're going to ask someone else first. They're going to get some information from, like, Mary down the road, like you said.
Or Google.
And then there's, or Google. And then there's like Jude sitting here, is like, I can assess you, or I can prescribe a plan for you, and you can get better from this. But nah, it's like, I'd rather take Mary's advice. It's
and I get that.
It's just one of those things. It's just common to happen, and that's why, you know, I tend not to. Like I said, if I'm going to work with friends, and I have done in the past, and especially more recently, I clearly demarcate the lines as well. It's like, well, I'm going to treat you like a client, so you treat me like the pro here, and
it's important.
And exactly. As soon as we establish that relationship, it's like, cool. Then things are going to work out. If that's not going to happen, then it's not going to work out. So,
has it ever? I wonder if I can ask it. Has it ever affected friendships, having worked with, or been a professional with a client professional relationship? Has it ever, I don't know, changed a friendship or anything like that? Do you know what I mean?
No, it's a good question. And for me, it hasn't. No, it's like there were, I mean, like back in the day, because now I work on a program basis. I don't do session by session, right? Because for me, it's like, I need to be involved in that transformation journey. I'm just not like, oh, here's something, and then just run with it and see what happens to you. It's like, I'm actually interested in and committed to your change. Is like, I don't want anything less than that. And so for me, ad hoc sessions, I just don't do them anymore. I just they're not where I want to be. Other people can do them. That's completely
really
fine,
cool.
because there's completely a place for it. But for me, it's like, well, I know the journey, and I want to support you on the journey. So it's more important that we do that than for me to do ad hoc. And I just don't enjoy it as much. But when I did do ad hoc sessions, it would just be, you know, I'd work with people for a period of time, and then after that, it would. Like friends, I'd work with them for a little bit, just, you know, give them a few sessions, and that was it. That was that. It wasn't really anything that got in the way. But yeah, you can imagine. It's like, actually, I don't know about you, but because I've got a lot of long-term clients, so then what ends up happening is they end up becoming friends as well. You know, it's like, I know these people, I see them more often than I see my family, you know, which is when you think about it like that, it's like, that's what the case is for most people when they see their trainer, but it's also sometimes it's the case for us as well. And so you can end up, you build relations with them, you get a great rapport with them, and, you know, you become pretty friendly. I've been out to, like, you know, dinner and drinks and stuff with clients in the past. And then, so that's when you have to start drawing.
That's tricky. Yeah, I know.
Drawing the line as well. It's like, okay, I get it, and I'm going to be friendly here, but then also, you know, let's get back into pro mode as well. It's interesting to work the boundaries.
It is, and I think those boundaries are very, very difficult. And I think over the years I've become more boundaried with that kind of thing. Like, I wouldn't necessarily, I get very friendly with my clients, make no mistake, but I don't really talk about me or my life. I don't really tend to go out with my clients because I feel like, for me anyway, that I want to maintain that boundary. And one person aside who has become a very, very close friend, everyone else I tend to keep that boundary with. And I think it was actually it's an interesting thing. Like, I remember when I was a personal trainer at a gym near where I live, one of the trainers, he said this bit of advice to me, and I always take it to hand, even now. And he was an older guy, and he was like a phenomenally amazing boxing trainer, and he was so wise and so worldly. And he turned around to me, and it was just quite a flippant remark, and he was like, never talk about you in your sessions, Jude. They come in, they ask you how you are, you say you're fine, and then you get on and you listen to them and you don't talk about yourself. And it's just something that I've always maintained, because he's right. He's damn right. It's their session. They don't need to hear about my life. It means not. It's not important. It's like, yeah, they can ask me little things, but this is about them, and this is about me trying to change them. So they don't need to know about me. And I think I've always taken that with me wherever I am. And I don't know if that's weird or not, because it almost makes me sound a bit robotic, but I feel like that's a really important thing for me, so that I can maintain and give that good professional session. Do you know?
Yeah, I got a new name for you.
What?
It's like number 27 on the list,
Yeah.
I think now. Robo Jude. As soon as you said robotic, I was like, I can do something with this.
Robo Juju.
Robo. See, that sounds like Powerpuff Girls type of, like, cute. Robo Juju.
No, I don't want that.
No.
No. Robo Jude. I
Yeah,
love
like,
it.
or like Dexter's Lab. I think it was Dexter's Lab where it was a baddie was Mojo Jojo. I think it was that. I can't remember. Oh God, this is bringing back some memories of childhood. But then there's so you could be like Robo Juju.
I want to be, no. I want RoboCop.
Yeah.
Robo Jude.
Yeah.
That's
Robo
me.
Jude. There
Oh
we go.
my God, that's hilarious.
So you become
Number
Robo Jude in your
27.
sessions.
I counted your names up the other day. I've forgotten how many you've got now. I think we're
The
at number
number of
20.
nicknames you've given me.
Yeah, I think we're at number
Whoa.
20.
Lord, that's that's epic. I mean, today 50G, marking 50 episodes, 50G.
50G.
Kind of got inspired by 50 Cent, but
Love 50
yeah,
Cent.
I guess there's another one. But there you go, Robo Jude. So you are
Robo
Robo
Jude,
Jude in
thanks.
your sessions.
Okay.
You flip between Robo Jude and Robo Juju in your
Yeah,
sessions.
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm like, I'm obviously like personable and that, but I don't relay. I don't sit there going, and another thing happened, and then he said this. And, do you know what I mean? I just don't do that.
Oh God, if you did that, I mean,
bad form.
yeah, and I'd be like, get off the podcast. I'm done with you.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Well,
this
that's
happened.
it. You just win it.
And this happened, and da, da, da.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to something that I wanted to say, and I don't know if it's relevant anymore, but it was just about how family treat you like a peer, and so I started working for quite a big online platform, which is aimed at healthy aging and older people. And the reason I knew about it is because my mum started doing sessions and classes and things like that. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's brilliant. Like they literally have like cognitive stuff, like all around book club and that kind of thing. And so I managed to get one of the roles as a presenter doing Pilates classes. And it's the first time that my mum has ever done any of my classes or anything. And it's really interesting. I actually find it quite nerve-wracking having her in my classes. It's like there's 300 people in these classes, but I find it quite nerve-wracking that she's there because she's never seen me teach before. And it's a weird thing. Like, I think I feel nervous about anyone that I know really well coming into my classes and watching me teach. But yeah, it's a weird thing. So I guess my question to you is, like, have you ever had anyone in your sessions, or I know you don't do group classes, but have you ever taught really close family?
They're like family. Like a little while ago, training my brother, his business partner Shad. So
Okay. Taught the
yeah,
boys.
another friend as well. I've taught the boys, taught friends, and yeah, that was okay. I think it's like you really want them to do well with it. Is
Yeah.
is what comes up for
Yeah.
me. It's
It
just like
is.
because they're
Yeah.
close to me. Is like, oh,
Yeah.
just I
I
really
need to
want
be
this to work
good.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I need to do my best.
more like. Well, for me, it's more like I really want this to work for you. You know, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I know this can work for you. I really want this to work for you. So that's the tricky part. Is like just going back to what you're saying about
Mm.
forcing it sometimes a little bit. It's like you can want
Mm.
something too much, and that's tricky. So I've got
Yes.
better at creating that boundary as well, like with friends and family.
Yeah.
But it's only
That's good.
through having gone through it. But yeah, I mean, like nowadays it's just us, having conversations. If they've got something they want to know about it, then it's
Mm.
like, hey, yeah, have a conversation with them about it. Or if they need to see someone, I'm like, you should go see this person or that person because they'll help you out. Um, yeah. What
Hmm.
about you?
Uh, other than other than my mum, I haven't really taught anyone close to me, and it is weird. It's bringing up that I get quite nervous with that. I think if you were to sit in on one of my classes, I think I'd be quite nervous. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Or like some of my like friends, and I don't know what that's about because I am I am essentially a performer, and
Yeah.
that's my background. So, and
Yeah.
I think another thing that's happened recently is one of my old boss, who I used to work in a Pilates studio down in Reigate. She's recently moved and she started to do my Zoom classes, and I found that really nerve-wracking. So I think it
Mm.
is just that I'm like, I don't know. It's like, is this what you expected? Like my teaching's changed? Yeah, I don't know. It's just a bit like you. I want it to be the best thing for them. I want it to
Mm.
be a good experience, and it's
Mm.
not like, oh, is this good enough? It's more just like, oh, are you getting enough out of this? I think it's
Mm.
that,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a funny thing when you have people that know you really well sit in, or you've worked for, sit in and do stuff of yours. Yeah, it was just a funny thing, but
Mm.
used to
Yeah.
it.
It's got me. Yeah, it's got me thinking. I think. I think for people that I know, I think I'll be okay with. But then it'll be um, then people who I've learned from, like mentors or
Yeah,
have taught me. If they were watching, then I think the nerves kick in because I'm like, I don't want to be bullshitting my way through this.
yeah,
It's
that's what
like
it is.
that's what I don't want it to come across like. So
Yeah,
it's like if I'm doing something, I don't want them to be thinking he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
yes,
That's basically it,
there's absolutely
right?
it as well.
And
Yeah,
uh, and so yeah, that's that for me is what it is probably where I get,
yeah,
well, I say probably where I get
nervous.
nervous. But then again, I've changed, like I've changed how I approach things every time. For example, you know how it is with neurokinetic therapy, like
Hmm.
the three levels, you got to certify for it. So you practice, you practice and you book your practical session in, and they basically test you out on a practical level to see if you
Yeah,
understand what the protocol is and how to do the testing and the protocol itself. But I never it never bothered me. It wasn't like I was because I've heard so many people, like everybody's like, oh, I'm really putting off booking my practical session in. Is like I really need to get good at this, and this, and this, and this, and I just get super stressed about it. Whereas for
I get
me,
that.
yeah, but I was just like, no, I'm just going to go in. If I screw it up, I've learned something from it. It's fine.
Hmm.
And
So you didn't care about failing. That's very cool.
yeah, yeah, I I didn't care about failing it. So that was really interesting. Where it's just like I'm just going to go in. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I'm good. I'm going to do it
Mm.
and see what happens. And I'll learn a lot from that practical session with this person as well. It isn't
Yeah,
to say that. Well, actually, it's not true that I didn't care about failing because I didn't want to have to go through it again, like
yeah,
book it again because
sure.
there's an expense there as well. But mostly it was just I'm cool to actually just do this practical and see what happens. And yeah, I think it would be yeah. So in that kind of learning environment, I guess that's a little bit different. Even though it's a test and I need to make sure the person testing me understands,
Mm.
thinks I understand what I'm doing. Um, But if it's like, watching in on a session, yeah, that could be, yeah, then, yeah, what it's made me think is what's really interesting about that is like you're putting a spotlight on everything that you do. So then you have to question yourself, how right is it that I'm doing this thing? I think that's yeah, that changes how you view what you're doing. And
Yeah.
that's a good lens. That's a good lens to view it from as well, because sometimes, it's like it's certainly happened in the past more, where it's just like you can go through the motions, you can just feel like total shit or something's happened, your mind's not in it, and you just feel like you're going through the motions a little bit. But this goes back to what I was saying about getting in the zone for the podcast, for example, is like you do the things that you need to do to get in the zone and just connect. And so I do that a lot more now as well. So I feel like I'm a lot less often going through the motions. And but also it goes back to what I was saying last week, I think it was, when it's like working with your ideal client. When you're working with your ideal client, you're a lot more fired up to, people who are not going to half-ass it, people who are fully in. I'm going to bring my A game every single time to that. Because you're just a lot more fired up. Because they're fired up, you're fired up. Because you're fired up, they're fired up. It's just that
Super
constant
important. Yeah.
feedback loop, or feed forward loop. And so, yeah, so because that happens more and more as my career has gone on, I'm just working more and more with the kind of people that I want to. I'm always jacked up to bring my A game for them. And so, yeah, so that's interesting to think about how you're, if somebody who you look up to in your field is like watching what you do, how would you approach it then? And how would you approach your sessions? How would you approach your programming and stuff like
Right.
that? And
Yeah. And
then it's like, how different would it be? And it's like, if you can say it wouldn't be that different, that's great. That means you're doing the best you can. If it's like, actually, there would be a couple things here I would shore up on, or I'd make sure that, I'd be like, okay, I'm 80% of the way here. Maybe this 20% is just I need a little bit more clarity on, I need a little bit more help with, or something like
yeah,
that. I think that's, so that's always a good lens to do your
it is.
sessions from, right? Or just practice with people.
Absolutely. And you saying that, I actually think I use that quite a lot. Without really thinking about it, it's something that I used to, I forgot to say, but it's something I used to use in performance quite a lot, or when I was nervous about performing or going in for an interview or whatever. And this is slightly different, but it's, how would so-and-so approach this interview or this performance? So someone that you really respect or a mentor, or if you're struggling with a certain situation, like how would your mentor or person that you have a huge amount of respect for, how would they approach this situation or performance or exam that you're about to do? And that was always really useful. And I kind of apply that now. Like, don't get me wrong, I get really, really nervous about teaching in front of 300 people. It's a very surreal experience. I love it. At the same time, it's like where I thrive, but I get terrified as well. So what I often try and do is like, what if I have, say, for example, so one of my mentors is Kathy Dooley, who's an anatomist, and she's an amazing lecturer, and I've done a lot of her courses. What would she think of the exercises that I'm teaching? And obviously I teach from a lot of the stuff that she's taught me. So I'd like to think that she would be happy with what I'm relaying to 300 people. And so I think I take that quite a lot. Like, what would these people think? I think what I find difficult and nerve-wracking is if someone doesn't know the exercises or doesn't know how I teach, what would they think? For example, with someone like you wouldn't necessarily come into a Pilates class and do all the exercises. So it'd be like, what would you think of how I blend all the exercises together? Or like my friends, like what would they think about how I blend everything in together? And I guess it's really weird, but I think I find it more nerve-wracking from that point than from maybe someone like Kathy, who knows the exercises that I'm teaching and why I've blended it the way I've blended it. Do you know what I mean? Or say another Pilates teacher. So another Pilates teacher, like, oh, right, okay, she's doing it like that. But also Pilates teachers, because I teach quite differently. So they might be like, why are you doing it like that? Why aren't you teaching belly button to spine? Yeah, so different people would make me nervous for different reasons, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's well, the whole topic in itself has got me thinking about a question that I like to ask myself when I'm executing on something is, will this do? And if the answer is, if you have to ask yourself the question, will this do? And invariably it won't, right? So just see where it goes with that. Because if you're just sitting there and you're doing something, it's like, will this do? Will this do? Is this enough? And if you're asking yourself that question, invariably the answer is no. It's not going to be enough, because you've asked yourself that question. Because you can finish a piece of work, or you can finish on something, and you can be like, that was it. That was enough. That'll do.
Okay.
And so there's things to explore there with that, because even goes back to earlier what I was saying is like starting a plan badly, right? Starting off on something badly, because then you are going to ask yourself the question, will this do? And if it doesn't, but you have to start, right? So it's one of those, there's an interplay there, is like, don't be so perfectionist, but also don't produce something or do something that's substandard, that's below your standards. So it's like, if you're going to do something badly, at least do it up to your standard of bad. I don't know. It's that's something worth finding where there's a healthy level playing field with the two. What do you reckon?
I think definitely, but I also, what came to me when you were saying that is it may be about your personality as well, because I will do something to as high a standard as I can, but I think there's also part of me that is like, will this do, or could I have done better? And I think I'm always pushing myself to wonder about that, and could this be better? Am I happy with this? Yes, I'm happy with it now, but will it do in the future? I think I've got that bit of dopaminergic ideal where I'm like, am I happy with it in the long run? I don't know. That's just what came to mind. It's like with my program at the moment, which I'm getting ready to put out, I'm always thinking about, is what I'm putting out, will it do? Is it good enough? I think it is, but I know in a year's time, I'm going to think differently, I think, and it will be better. So I think it's okay to have those will it do moments, but also being confident enough to go, yeah, actually that is good. So do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Because where I'm going, like where I'm thinking with it now is also like, the things that I start off with, like the programs I've created, like the online, I'm working on an online lower back pain program specifically. And, I've got my online coaching program. And when I was starting with that, it was just like, don't try and be too perfect, just get the bare minimum out.
Yeah.
And so I think, I guess it also comes down to following some basic rules as well, where, and just knowing what your baseline is like, will this do as a first draft?
Yes, absolutely.
Can I get this out there, and with this bare minimum, will that be effective?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. That's great. And then, like you said, 100%, you will get better at knowing what works better over time as well. But it has to come from getting that thing out in the first place. So I think it's like, set your base level. You have to be kind of honest about that as well, because I know for you especially, you really struggle with like, I have to have this perfect, right? And if it ain't up to this, if it ain't up to this level, then I'm not going to put it out there. But I know that what you've got, like I've seen some of the stuff that you've got, right? And I know what you've got is actually fine the way it is right now. You can push it out there. But there's just that part of you, which is like, I'm not going to let myself do that. I'm not going to let myself put it out there.
It is confidence. So, it's like, so it's will it sell? It's that kind of thing as well. Will people resonate with it? Is it okay? And I think that's where I'm coming from. When you were saying it's like, is this enough? Will it do? And for someone like me, who is a huge perfectionist, it's like, no, it's never going to do. But do you know what I mean? It's like, you have to be okay with that as well.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because then you start to learn that about yourself, or you do know that about yourself, but then you have to um, ask yourself, like, how useful is it to me to have uh, to be on that level of perfectionism?
Yes.
And in most cases, it never is, right? It's never that
Yes.
useful
No.
because you just don't get out there. You don't put yourself out there. You don't do the thing that you need to do. You don't, like, your program doesn't go out there. You
No, I
don't,
know.
because you don't know something maybe like 100% inside out, then you don't coach somebody the way they need to be coached.
Mm.
And but it's like, no, it's okay, because there's a baseline that you do know, and you just put it out there. So I think, and in going through, having gone through that process myself, is like, I've always had that thing is like, well, it takes me this much, this effort to get this thing to be exactly how I want it to be. So that's just a lot of effort, and I'm not going to do it. Whereas
Okay.
if I start to, whereas if I start to think about, okay, what's the basic level that I could get away with, and I'll
Mm.
build on top of that. That's entirely different. Then I get a sense of relief from that, and I'm like, okay, well, if I just get this, aim for this level,
Mm.
and then I won't be asking myself the question, will this do? I know it will do, and I can get
Okay.
that out there, and then I build on that, and then I build on that, and then I build on that, because ultimately, you're always going to be improving that thing.
Yeah.
It's again, it's just like, that's like a microcosm of life as well. It's like life is always just like, improvement built on improvement built on improvement.
Yeah.
You don't just stop, because it's one of the things I said a little while ago, which was, if you're not expanding your horizons, you're moving backwards,
Mm.
because you are constructed for novelty and challenge. You need novelty and challenge to get a sense of fulfillment, and that is like, starting to put that into place with knowing what, like, being honest about the base level you can get away with, so you don't have to ask yourself the question, will this do? And then keep aiming for better and better, but keep building on that, because
Mm.
you get better feedback from that as well, right? You get better feedback from
Absolutely.
having given that basic level, seeing how that works out, and then how well it works out, how well it doesn't, how well it works out, and the things that you're learning about, and the things that are missing from it, you can keep recalibrating, rather than creating something and
Nice.
feeling like it's perfect, but then you got to tear it down from the beginning, right down to the base level, because
Yeah.
you didn't realize that it wasn't the thing that was needed. It happens a lot with goals as well. I think with goals, it's like you set your how up, and you're like, okay, this is how I'm going to get to. Like, weight loss is a good one. It's like, okay, this is, I need to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to go about it. This is so that means if I do it in 10 weeks, I'm going to lose a pound a week, and I'm going to
Mm.
do my calories like this, and I'm going to work my training program like that. And then bam, 2 weeks in, you pick up an injury, you're out for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Now what, right? So is it like that? The how, because you had the how, that's completely changed, and then it throws you off, and you're like, okay, well, I'm done. I'm gonna miss out, and you feel like a piece of shit. But really, like, what's even more important than the how is the why, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
that Friedrich Nietzsche line, which is, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. So
It's nice.
if you have that strong why, so like, what does it actually mean to you? Like, visualize and feel what it means to you to drop that 10 pounds. Whatever your goal is, drop that 10 pounds, get out of back pain, start going and playing the sports that you want to play,
Mm.
feel more muscular, feel more confident in your body, all those different things. What does it actually mean to you? And what does it actually look like? And what does it actually feel like? Then it doesn't matter what happens with the how. You will make it happen one way or another,
Mm.
because that why is really, really strong and really, really important. And so you create that stronger why, and then that how just gets taken care of. There's another great line. I think it's a author called Tom Robbins, not Tony Robbins, Tom Robbins.
Okay.
Is stay committed to your decisions, but stay flexible with your approach. And that
Nice.
ties
Yeah, I
in
like that.
exactly,
It's really nice.
which is, yeah, you've got your commitment to your goal, and you know what it is, you know what it looks like, you know what it feels like, but life always going to throw you a curveball, so you just run with it, and you just be flexible about how you get there.
Mm.
And it's like, it's not, yeah, don't be too stringent about it as well. So and keep moving forward in one way or another. Because if you keep having to try and be perfect with it, again, you're going to stop yourself from moving forward. So
Absolutely.
just, it's like, yeah, those all or nothing days is like, oh, you know what, I ate a croissant for breakfast, that just means the rest of my day it's out the window. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna, eat pizza for lunch and then go and have a freaking
Yeah.
burrito,
Yeah.
like 3 burritos for dinner or something. It's like, no, that's not how it
It's
works.
not
It's
necessary, is it? No.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, one little fumble doesn't dictate who you are and what you're trying to achieve. It's like, let's okay, it's like it's only 9:30 a.m. By the time lunchtime comes around, you can change how that worked out. You just recalibrate. So you don't worry about being perfect about it. Just stay committed to your decision, but stay flexible in your approach, and make sure
Yeah,
that
it's
why
really
is
nice.
strong.
That's really, really nice. And as you were talking, I also thought about it's all about belief and adaptability as well, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
you have to have that belief and create that belief. If you haven't got that for your why, that you can believe that you can get to that why, then I think that's part of it as well. And I think
Yeah.
and maybe that's why I stumble a little bit. It's like having the belief that I can get there. And I know I can, but it just takes a little bit of time, doesn't it? But also just being adaptable. If things do go wrong, or if things change, or like life throws you a curveball, as you say, you can be adaptable and work around that curveball and continue to reach towards that why, I guess, as well.
Yeah. I'll take it. Like I'll build on that a little bit,
Mm.
which is you don't necessarily have to be adaptable already, but if
Okay.
you have that strong enough why and you believe
Mm.
in that why, that will make you adaptable. See what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's like nothing is going to get in the way of you doing that thing because that why is so
Yeah. You're not
important
going to
and you
throw it out the
believe.
window. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you will start to find a way. It may be unfamiliar territory for you. I mean, it always is, right? It's like you're going
Mm.
for something that you haven't achieved before, so
Yeah.
it's always going to be unfamiliar territory, and you might be worried that it's okay if shit goes off kilter and you're not on plan, not on point with that plan. What am I going to do? But you re-tap into that belief and that why, and
Mm.
then it gives you that source of power. It's the source of your power to move forward in whatever way you have to. So it's kind of, in a lot of ways, it's like it doesn't matter where you are right now. It doesn't matter who you think you are or what you are. If you believe in that thing strongly enough, and if that
Mm.
why is strong enough, then you will become adaptable. You
Mm.
will become all the things you need to become to achieve that thing. I think,
More open to it. Yeah.
yeah, and I think shout out to Sam, Umar's client who we had on the podcast. I think it's episode 26. If I remember
I'm
that, then
sure it is. I'm sure it is.
yeah, yeah, it's like she's somebody who just never cooked before. All right,
Right.
so she had this goal, was like needed to lose weight, was in like whole body was in pain, and she never cooked. And then as soon as like Umar was like, okay, we're gonna need to do this, we're gonna need to change this up. She's like, fine, completely changed there and then because that why and that belief was just so strong,
Nice.
and it didn't matter. It was like, I'm going to do this. Like I don't know how to cook. I've never learned to cook, but I'm going to learn how to do these, create these meals for myself, which mean that I'm going to be out of pain and I'm going to feel good in my body and I'm going to lose all the excess weight that I don't need.
That's
Amazing.
amazing.
Yeah, it's because that belief was there. It's because that why
Mm.
was strong enough, and yeah, it's incredible. Whenever you see that play out, that's what we're inspired by. That's the kind of stuff that we see. It's like why,
Yeah.
for example, David Goggins, for example, is like he's like super out there in terms of he's an incredibly intense dude, but
Mm.
you see where he's come from and that belief that he instilled in himself, and
Yeah, I've seen where he's come from.
it's
Yeah.
just yeah, and
Mm.
that's what's hits home, is just inspires, and it's like it's amazing and inspiring when you see the end product, like you see what he is,
Yeah.
and but it's the thing is it's simple. It's like it's not easy, but it's simple. It's like he just started doing the things that were important for
Implement
him
the
to do.
steps. Yeah.
Yeah, and he just
Mm.
carried on doing it, and he's just that kind of person who just takes it to the extreme. But if there's anything to take from it, is just like just fucking do the thing. You just
Mm.
start, and do the thing, and you keep taking one step in front of the other. And crucial thing we talk about often is like, appreciate every step that you're taking, because it's important to celebrate the steps, because you're like, I'm moving forward. I'm creating something here. And you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. And this is one wonderful thing about what I've learned by doing this podcast as well, is like, we got to number 50. I don't even realize this is number 50, not just because time is crazy, like warp speed, fast, whatever.
Yeah.
It's more like I just just wake up one day and I've hit number 50,
and it's happened. Because you've implemented the steps.
You just keep going, like week on week, just keep going, just one step at a time, just keep going.
Absolutely. That's also lovely. And as you were talking, it reminded me of something that I've read recently. So I'm reading a book at the moment called How to Do the Work by, and I can't remember her surname, but I think it's Nicole Perrier. I can't remember. She calls herself a holistic psychologist. And in the beginning of the book, she talks about a client of hers that has MS, or someone that she met who had, I should say, or is in remission from MS now, but she had MS, multiple sclerosis, and she was told by many, many doctors that was it. It was never going to happen. She was never going to get better. She couldn't run, walk, whatever. She was just bed bound, wheelchair bound, and she just started to create this belief and implement little steps into her everyday life about the belief that she was going to get better, or that she could have a better life. So she started it, the way she just started by having one glass of water in the morning to help her feel better and to give her the encouragement to move forward. And then she started journaling. So she'd have a glass of water and journal about what she wanted for her future self. And then that's how it spiraled. She started to implement other steps, and I can't remember what else it was, but after so many months and maybe a couple of years, she's now running. And I just thought that was a beautiful thing, that you start with one thing, having a glass of water, even though you're in a really, really dark place and it's a really bad space, but you're going to put in these tiny little steps to work towards feeling better. And then you journal, and then you take a breathwork class, and you do all this stuff to implement those changes. And before you know it, like you were saying with the podcast, it's slightly different, obviously, but you're in such a different space, and you've done all this stuff, and look at where you are. And I guess that's kind of what I got from what you were saying, that it does take belief and the why and adaptability to bring yourself into that different space. It might be really, really hard, and it's not just an easy route, but it is simple, and you've just got to keep going day after day. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's a powerful, powerful story. Is just take a glass. That's how straightforward it has to be.
Glass of water.
And then when you look at it, like in a grand scheme of things, 2 years later, she's essentially living a life she's running, when she was told that she's never going to be able to do any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And then like, it sounds like a lot, but at the same time, in the grand scheme of things, like 2 years to have everything in front of you after that be exactly how you want it to be, that's priceless. You don't want.
It is priceless.
Like,
2 years isn't a lot though, G, is it? Like when you look at things, it's not a lot.
I mean, it's been a year and we've hit like 50 episodes. I'm like, what? That doesn't even feel like it's that long. It's so weird. Like, this is where like time really gets me, because I had this really great one where, like, I was just remembering with a client as well, Raminder. She was on the podcast as well, because she's just like, awesome personality to just go for it and just smash what she wanted to smash.
Yeah.
It's like, we were working together for 6 months, and the thing that I thought was like, all the wins that she came up with from having done the program, and like, where she is now after having done it is incredible. And it's just it makes me think of the passage of time and what you can do with that passage. Is like, if she didn't do any of those things, she wouldn't have those wins, and she wouldn't know the things that she knows about herself now, like what she's capable of, and getting back to doing things that she's loved and has missed but just didn't realize it. And it's like, imagine that 6 months and not doing that. You just like I think of it like, I look at it like, like kind of on a graph. You're a dot on this point, and it's like, okay, like that bottom axis is time, and the top axis is kind of fulfillment as well. It's like if she hadn't done anything for those 6 months, she's just kind of moving along. Like potentially, I mean, she's the kind of person who's always going to do something useful with herself. So, but just
Yeah.
like for the sake of argument, there's there's a lot of people who wouldn't, but and she will find some level of fulfillment. But there'll be people who just go along, and you'll end up being straight on that line. But what ended up like instead made a decision and then went out that way instead.
Amazing.
So the level, like, over that time, the level of fulfillment and what you get out of it beyond all of that is just way up. So
Yeah.
and it's a crazy divergent line, 2 lines as well. So it's just like, just make that decision, just make that one decision. It's like it can be a small step, but it's the start of something big.
And if you do it regularly and you implement it regularly over time, who knows where it's going to take you. And yeah, that graph for some people might not look like that. It might be like up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, but you will get there. It's like transformation is messy, but you will get there. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a prerequisite. It's like it's going to be difficult, but
It's simple, but it's difficult. Yeah.
That's why you got to want it enough. That's why the why and the belief is got to be stacked up, and you got to come up with all the reasons why this is important, and then believe you can pull it off. Like you don't have to have all the answers, but you just start believing in the outcome.
Definitely. No, it's really cool.
Yeah. Sounds like a good place to leave it today.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's just, shorter than normal, but that was just
That's all right.
It's a nice little perfect spot. And, first of all, like before we finish, I just want to say for everybody who's been on the journey with me, with us for the 50 episodes, and for everybody who's tuning in now, we just really appreciate it. It's amazing that we get to kind of talk to you without really talking to you.
Absolutely.
It's amazing that we've got people tuning in every week who are interested to hear what we have to say and are getting a lot of value from it. So I'm super grateful that people are tuning in and getting value from this. And please share it with other people if you feel like the value that you're getting from it is worthy of other people's attention as well. Just help the podcast get out there. It's like please feel free to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you're enjoying the content, and subscribe to the show on whichever podcast channel that you are watching on or listening on. So that could be Apple Podcasts, it could be Spotify, it could be Podcast Addict, Podchasers, wherever, like Apple, Amazon Music, we're everywhere. So tune in and subscribe to the show from there so you never miss an update. And just really thank you for tuning in, and let us know what you think of this episode.